who are concerned about the things they see going on around them. There are three reasons why people are upset. The first reason is because the subject itself is an upsetting topic. That's understandable. When you begin to understand and realize what it is, the strategy and tactics of the global Islamic movement actually are, it's upsetting. And it should be. The number two reason why people are upset is because no one told them about this before. How is it that we've come 15 years after 9/11 and we still don't know the most basic fundamental attributes of the ideology that is emerging more visibly every day in our neighborhoods and in our country, not to mention the rest of the world. And the third reason that people are upset is because we have to talk about it at all. And I mean that by, isn't that what the Department of Homeland Security was founded for? We assumed that that's what they would do. They would keep this threat at a distance. But as we found out, we're facing it everywhere we turn, every day. How many people in the audience have taken the vow to protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic? Look around, everyone. It's usually about 20-25%, more than you might think if someone were to ask you. How many people that raised your hand just now, who may not be active duty any longer, feel like your vow is also retired? Anybody that feels their vow is retired? Not a single person has ever raised their hand. The reason why is if you take the vow willingly as a person of integrity, there's something that you can never do with this right hand again, and that is cover your face. I'd like to ask you to give a round of applause to people who have stood up for our country. And now I'd like to ask you to take the vow yourself as a citizen, to do your part in a democracy, in a constitutional republic that is still a government of, for, and by the people. And if each one of us would take the vow that we will do our part to stand up for our country and protect her from threat, both foreign and domestic. And if you know, if you're in law enforcement, you know the saying goes, as soon as you touch the handle of the door, you're on duty. From now on, I would like to suggest that you consider that same mindset when you ask, what can we do? Is there anything that we can do? Yep, there sure is. You can go on duty as soon as you go outside. And share the word and the things that you learn in meetings like this and through your own study, familiarity with the people that you meet, and become a force multiplier. We have 2.5 months left in a historic moment, a turning point of our country. And everyone here can be a part of it, should be a part of it. And I would hate that any of us would look back and have to deal with a sense of remorse or guilt that we didn't do all that we could have done. Let's not be ones who have to say that. My title is Strategy and Tactics of the Global Islamic Movement. Why do I pick that? Because I think it's obvious that our foreign and domestic policy have no clue what the difference between strategy and tactics actually are. Because policies like countering violent extremism or focus on jihad and the violence that's going on in the world is all based on tactics. And they're kaleidoscopic, they change constantly. By the time you finish identifying what you think this tactic is or the policy is, it's already changed and moved. So you never are able to define it, and that's why the government has such a difficult time telling us what exactly they are trying to do as far as countering violent extremism or our counterterrorism policy, both domestically and in the foreign arena. However, if you understand what the strategy of our adversary, and in a way I'm overlapping exactly what Mr. Woods said, and anyone who is a subject matter expert in the nature of threat will tell you, going all the way back to Sun Tzu and before then, that unless you know who the enemy is, there's no way you can possibly defeat him. So the difference between strategy and tactics is really simple. When we're all finished tonight and we begin to go home, what will be the strategy of everyone here? We all will have the same strategy. Go home. Real simple. It's not hard to define the strategy, but what is complicated or kaleidoscopic is how will you do it? We all have an array of choices between here and wherever our home is, and all kinds of intervening circumstances will come along. If we were all here a month straight, and we all sat in exactly the same seats that we are now, and we all left at exactly the same time every night for the whole month, we would never get home in any given day at the same time, because there's a million different variables that intervene along the way, weather, other traffic, you name it, a million different things that intervene and affect your tactical course that you take home. But in all that time, your strategy never changes. So what is the strategy of the global Islamic movement? Implementation of Sharia law, as plainly stated themselves. The strategy of the global Islamic movement is not jihad, or violent extremism, or terrorist attacks. Those are tactics. There's a whole spectrum of tactics that are authorized by the Quran. We're going to look at a few of them. One of them is dawah. The imam from Kansas, that's a tactic, what he was talking about. He actually never mentioned in that video what the strategy of it all was, other than to make people Muslim and grow. But why? He never actually clearly defined it, because according to the mandate of Allah, all Muslims are called upon to do dawah, which means promotion or invitation to join Islam, so that a thing called the observant Muslim base. It's from the explanatory memorandum in the Holy Land Foundation trial. How many know about the Holy Land Foundation trial? Good, real good. Well, in there is a phrase in paragraph 1 of page 1 that you can water ski right over real quickly if you don't realize what it actually says. And that is the phrase observant Muslim base. But what in Arabic it sounds a lot different. It's al-Mutsima, al-Islamiyya, al-Qaeda. You recognize the last word? It was written by the Muslim Brotherhood, not Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda is not an organization, it's a concept. And the Muslim Brotherhood defined this concept in this document, which is a strategic and tactical document, initiated by permission of the Shura Council in 1987, to summarize what the goals of the Islamic movement, meaning the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, were. Because in every environment around the world, the tactics have to be a little bit different. The environment is different. It may be flat, it may be up and down, using allegory of terrain, and they have to adapt. So what they do is they bring in individuals and they create what is called an observant Muslim base. Observant means obedient. An obedient base, Al-Qaeda, and the Muslim Brotherhood recognized that the very first Al-Qaeda that existed in history was in a place called Medina, under the rulership or the authority of Muhammad, which began in 621. It didn't start in Afghanistan with Osama bin Laden. It started with the Muslim Brotherhood, and actually before him with the original Al-Qaeda, which was the city of Medina, Al-Yathrib. Let's pretend that you're a counterterrorism specialist, a subject matter expert, and your supervisor brings this to you and says, Joe, I want you to give me a report in 15 minutes on whether that icon there is a threat to our national security. Okay? So, okay, well, you go back to your office and you have a couple friends that are good at this kind of stuff, and you say, hey guys, tell me what you see here. So, hey guys, tell me what you see here. What do you see there in that animated icon? Just somebody name it. A couple swords, yeah. A world rotating. How do you know it's a Quran? That's my first question. Okay, good, very good observation. You must be an intel officer there. And then some other stuff on there we haven't mentioned yet, or if you did, I didn't hear it. The words. Now, haven't we been told that words matter over and over again? So if words matter, maybe these words matter, would you think? Before we look at the words, though, we've got a Quran, we've got a rotating earth, and watch real carefully when North America comes around and see whether or not there's an exclusion zone there, meaning off limits. Okay, did you see one? No. Try again. You missed it. Nope, there's no exclusion zone. So what does that imply? That whatever this icon is attempting to convey, that it applies to the North America as well, doesn't it? Okay, in fact, that the Quran there, if the people that created this icon are rational, which we have to assume they are, then they put it in there for a reason. And what would that reason be? Well, it means it's authorized by the Quran. But wait a minute, already we got a problem. I thought the Quran was a book of peace. So, okay, what about the two swords? Why are they there? Yeah, one of them is enforce implementation of Sharia externally, and the other one is to keep Sharia law internally. And that also implies that this is a spectrum of tactics that go up to and including the use of the sword to enforce or implement the tactical or strategic goal that you see. It's not the only way, but it includes that way if necessary. Okay, we're left now with the words. The white on the right, the first word is al-Aqwan. The other word on the left means al-Muslimin. Al-Aqwan, al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood. The very same organization that Dan referred to earlier. This is their icon. Down at the bottom is the yellow words. It means wa'idu, prepare. Prepare to do what, do you suppose? Is it worth asking if it says prepare that maybe it means something? Well, it's from Quran 860. Chapter 8 is Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. It's the most violent chapter in the entire Quran. The entire chapter is about plundering and pilfering the resources of non-believers. And it gives an elaborate justification for doing it. It's called Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. And in that chapter, verse 860, is this word, wa'idu, which means prepare to terrify your enemies and slaughter them in warfare. And please tell me, what in that icon could possibly be considered as moderate? Why should I ask that? Well, because this is the organization that this administration formed an overt political alliance with, starting in 2008. And the absolute refusal to acknowledge what they themselves plainly state their intentions are. They brought these Muslim Brotherhood leaders of organizations established here in the United States into a direct affiliation, gave them positions of influence, as was indicated earlier with that one picture with the individuals within the administration. So can you imagine if a person like me, who is a subject matter expert in the threat, the strategy and tactics of the global Islamic movement based on Quranic Arabic, what do you think is going to happen if a law enforcement officer stands up against an administration that makes an alliance with an organization like that? Something's going to give, right? Well, I'll tell you about what happened as we go along. One more time. This, in addition to the icon, the animated icon, this is their motto. Allah is our objective. The Prophet is our leader, not Washington or Lincoln. The Quran is our constitution, not the U.S. Constitution. Jihad is our way. Dying in the way of Allah is our highest aspiration. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? It has not changed since 1928. This is the motto of a so-called moderate organization, according to the definition of this administration, which leads to the question, what does exactly moderate mean? Who has ever defined it? Today's moderate looks like it could be tomorrow's radical, doesn't it? It's a subjective term. We think we know what it means because we think we know what the word moderate means. But you find out when you compare the narrative of the administration to which they actually say that you don't really know what it means at all. We're just being told what it means. And Allahu Akbar, that is what Omar Mateen was shouting when he was killing people in the nightclub. And that's why Loretta Lynch redacted it from the transcript, because she said she didn't want American citizens to be re-victimized, which I think is the first time I ever heard that word, re-victimized. Nonetheless, what she really redacted it for is because he was shouting it on his cell phone while he was killing people, so that they would know, even being an American citizen, that they would record it in the 9/11, and then it would be a testimony of what his intentions were. But the administration has insisted for the last 8 years that Allahu Akbar is simply a phrase of respect to God. Therefore, they have to redact it, otherwise it contradicts their narrative. They say that it has nothing whatsoever to do with violence or jihad or any of those other things, even though people yell this or say this hundreds of millions of times every single day. By self-definition, Sharia, by the way, that word up there in the red Arabic, that's just what it says, Sharia. Sharia is a legal system governing Islam, derived from the Quran, the Hadith, and tradition. By the way, tradition seems like a benign word until you start talking about female genital mutilation and things like that. By the way, they're not sending the girls out anymore. They're bringing the women who cut them here. And I'll give you a homework assignment, even though it's very unpleasant. Start listening in the news for examples of female genital mutilation happening here in your own state, if you want to start with that, let alone the United States. Sharia is a compilation of moral, civil, and religious law, as opposed to any human legislation, except for the U.S. Constitution. Wait a minute, I forgot that. No, I didn't forget. It's also opposed to the U.S. Constitution. Now, is the verb opposed a passive verb? It's an aggressive verb, assertive verb, right? It's also in the imperative tense, meaning once it's said, it must go forward continuously. So should we take the definition, the self-defined definition of Sharia law according to Islam at face value? If we do, what does that mean? If we do, then it means it's violating Article 6 of the Constitution, which simply says that this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, period. What are we arguing about? If you want to look at it from another perspective, if it was possible, conceivable, just for the sake of the discussion, that you could implement Sharia law in the United States without any violence being involved at all, would it still be okay? Okay, then what are we arguing about? Why are we constantly distracted by the argument that Islam is a religion of peace? It's a false argument. Sharia law is in direct subversion of the Constitution. It's irrelevant whether it's so-called peaceful or not, or whether it's implemented by violence or not. It's a false argument. Meanwhile, I want to show you, it's ironic. This is the Declaration of Independence, the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and in organizing its powers in such form as to them shall be seen most likely to affect their safety and happiness. When I've been speaking across the country for several weeks and months now, and invariably somebody would ask me in every group, why are they doing it? And first I answered in a variation of the Islamic theme, enmity and loyalty, what you love and what you hate. But then I found something more precise. In the Declaration of Independence, it says that it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and that's what they're seeking to do. It's called hope and change. Another word for that is alter. Now, their supposed allies, Islam, who wants to abolish any form of human government, is willing, certainly willing to cooperate with them. After all, it helps their strategic goal to bring chaos into any culture, and they use the progressive leftists to do it. The progressive leftists think that they're cooperating with Islam, but this concept of Marxist-Leninism and progressive leftism is only 100 years old. How old is Islam? 1400. Who do you think has the tactical advantage in this weapon, in this argument? They don't know the malignancy of the nature of the what I call the green dragon. Next, please. In our world, what does Sharia look like today? Next. We won't read all of this. This is Sayyid Qutb, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, who based his ideology on an implacable, fierce hatred of Christianity as he knew it. He called it a hideous schizophrenia. By the way, if you work through your coordinators, Bev and Dan, you can have a copy of the PowerPoint. So just let them know. You don't have to worry about missing anything per se. And all the URLs and the links to all the sources that I'm showing you today are all down in the notes section of each slide, and you can walk your way back through all of this and familiarize yourself more thoroughly with the nature of the subject and what I'm providing for you. What I want to look at is down the line at the bottom. A mission to repair the world, Tikkun Olam. Interesting, black version. By bringing about the rule of God's law on earth. And what is God's law on earth called? That's my point. From the very beginning, Muslim Brotherhood is an Arab revivalist movement intent on implementing Sharia law. Where? Everywhere on earth. And where does that come from in the Quran? Quran 2, verse 191 through 193, which we'll look at in a little while. But if someone were to say, well, where's that? It doesn't say that in the Quran. Yes, it does. Quran 2, 191 through 193. This is a map. If this was an animated map, you'd see those lines fluxing back and forth. This is a tactical map. It's just a glimpse, a snapshot of the gravitational force that at current time is emanating in a place we call Syria and Iraq, which until 1917 was called Al-Shams, the place of the sun. That's what ISIS actually means in Arabic, the Islamic State of Al-Shams, ISIS. It's called that because that's the place where the sun rose. It's like Mizrahi in Hebrew. The Mizrahi Jews came from Iran and further east, the east. And this just shows you what I call the gravitational force, the magnetic power of Sharia. These people are not going there to fight jihad just to fight it. They're going there to implement Sharia through the tactic of jihad. It's an important distinction to make. They're not motivated by going there to fight as much as they are motivated, the reason what they're fighting for, the goal that they're trying to achieve. And if you listen carefully to what ISIS says, they say it almost every day. The purpose for our existence is to implement Sharia law, which then takes you right back to the purpose of Sayyid Qutb and the Muslim Brotherhood. And lo and behold, you discover that ISIS is actually nothing more than Muslim Brotherhood using a different tactical approach than the one that they are using here, which is infiltration and what we call civilization or settlement jihad. That picture he showed of the trail of people going to the desert, eventually I assume ending up here, is a variation of the theme on settlement and or civilizational jihad. It's part of the process. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, it's called observant Muslim base, Al-Muslima, Al-Islamiyya, Al-Qaeda. And according to the Quran, those who are muhajirun, those who immigrate, receive the same reward in heaven as the mujahideen, the people who fight, and they know it. They don't come here to learn to like hot dogs and apple pie. They're coming here because they have a very conscious awareness that when they come here, they're going to receive a reward in heaven for the sacrifice that they've made, leaving behind the familiar to come to a new place to do exactly what that imam was telling the people in little bitty Cedar Falls to do, to promote Islam through dawah. And that audience that that imam was talking to is a little fragment of the observant Muslim base that I referred to earlier. So they know, according to the Quran, if you do hijrah, it's a sacrifice fi sabilillah, in the way of Allah, and that you will receive a reward for it commensurate with the sacrifice of those who fight with swords and guns. Did you know that? When you put it into perspective, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Next, after that, this is just an organization that was founded, and next clip too, by Yusuf al-Qaradawi. How many know who he is? Yusuf al-Qaradawi. He's the Sheikh of the Global Muslim Brotherhood. The coup with Erdogan that happened a month or so ago was endorsed by the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. It was an attempt to push away the Sharia implementation policies of the Turkish government, but it failed. And Yusuf al-Qaradawi endorsed Erdogan and said that he was the rightful leader of the global Ummah. Ummah means mother, but it also means community and or nation. And isn't it comforting to see that this organization would only fight against those who are hostile to the Islamic nation? And that's the caveat. And that word in Arabic is a concept we'll look at a little bit more, called fitna. When you oppose the implementation and the advancement of Islam, you are causing the global ummah, entire global ummah, not just one person, fitna, which is a capital crime. And that's why the Quran says fitna is worse than slaughter. To oppose the advancement of Islam is a greater crime than you being killed for it. And that's why they indiscriminately kill people by the thousands when they come into new places. Because those people who resisted them caused them fitna. And they can be killed according to Quran. And that is Quran 2:191, which we will look at later. Down at the bottom it says the International Union of Muslim Scholars was founded by the fellow I just mentioned, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the Sheikh of the Muslim Brotherhood. When he came to Egypt for the first time in 30 years, in February of 2011, he led hundreds of thousands of men shouting at the top of their voice, Al-Quds, Rahim, Shahadin, Milyonin, Al-Quds, Rahim, Shahadin, Milyonin. We will march to Jerusalem to die as martyrs by the millions. They didn't say, long live George Washington, long live Abraham Lincoln. No, they told you right there what the goal of the so-called Arab Spring actually was. And it's not even that even itself. Remember, words matter. Arab Spring is not Arab Spring. It's Al-Arab, Al-Arabiya, the resurrection of the Arab. It's a revival movement. And who started the modern revival movement? Muslim Brotherhood in 1928. So now you see why the Muslim Brotherhood came in and co-opted the entire so-called democratic uprising and pushed them literally off the stage and took it over, because that was their intent all along. And the only problem is they overplayed their hand. And the people rose up for a second time with al-Sisi and arrested them and put them in jail. And then the Obama administration came along and threatened them and said, if you don't create an inclusive, remember there's that word again, inclusive government with the Muslim Brotherhood, we will cut off foreign aid to you. Did we follow through with our threat? We sure did. We cut off aid to al-Sisi. Give just enough time for Hamas and the other operators down there in Sinai to get a tactical position set up, and now it's too late. They're running amok in the Sinai. Next, please. Here's an article, go ahead, next, that dismisses people's concerns about Sharia law, makes us look like we are worried about ghosts and afraid of the dark because of the so-called threat of Sharia. But remember what I call the con, DNC? Do you know what this Constitution says, Mr. Trump? Guess who wrote that? Juristic Clarification of Sources of Islamic Law. Qazir Muazzam Khan, Houston Journal of International Law, autumn 1983, 23 years ago? 33 years ago. That's why I call it the con. He's doing the con. He's playing us because he's a pro-Sharia guy, affiliated, as far as I understand, with another organization that we're going to look at pretty quick, called this Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. Next, please. And then click one more time. Anybody know about the Glenn Beck case? He's being sued by a person that doesn't exist, which is quite a trick. He's being sued by a guy named Al-Harbi. He's a member of a Saudi family. He was at the scene of the Boston bombing, and he was tackled, taken to the hospital, interviewed by the FBI. His place was searched, and in the morning, 0600, they created what we call a targeting framework event on him and said that we were going to deport him on terrorist charges. 3B is the acronym, means terrorist related. It's either you actually involved physically in terrorism, you are involved with an organization or a person who is physically involved in terrorism, or you're providing financial support to terrorism. All of those will get you a 3B classification. You're out. That's what the Holy Land Foundation trial was about. By the way, that's not exactly focused, is it? Can we somehow focus just a bit? Anyhow, or anywho, as they say in Ohio. Don't worry about it. He has to do acrobatics, so we won't do it. What was I going to say? And then it turns out that 4 days later, after the bombing, Janet Napolitano testified before the House Committee on Homeland Security and said there is no Saudi individual who was ever a person of interest, a subject of interest, or was ever going to be deported. And your question is so full of misapprehension and misinformation, Mr. Duncan, that it's not even worthy an answer, and I won't, so I'm going to give you information when we're ready to give it to you. That's what she said, Janet Napolitano. One problem, one giant noisy fly in the ointment, Mr. Haney. That pesky Mr. Haney. I was standing there holding the proof that she was lying in my hand. Because guess where I worked? National Targeting Center. Guess what my job was? Targeting frameworks. That's why I knew where to look. And why did I have nexus to the case? We call it nexus, connection. Well, amazing thing is, 4 years before the Boston bombing, I put in 128 records surrounding the Islamic Society of Boston and the 40 individuals that had derogatory on them, derogatory information on them, in other words, terrorist-related stuff, and the 15 or 20 organizations related to the ISB, Islamic Society of Boston, 4 years before the bombing. Not only is it bad enough that the administration forced me to modify all those records in 2009, which you've heard me talk about, what I call the first great purge. It was a year after the Holy Land trial, so they already knew the Muslim Brotherhood was affiliated with Hamas. But would you like to guess how many times anybody in the law enforcement community queried any of those 128 records before the Boston bombing in the 4-year period beforehand? Zero. Good guess. How many after? Also zero. And then Vali, the imam of the ISB, really spilled the beans because during the lead up to the House or the White House Summit on Countering Violent Extremism in February 15, he told reporters, well, if the ISB was a terrorist organization or affiliated with violence, the DOJ and the FBI and the CRCL and DHS wouldn't have been having outreach meetings with us. That's in 2013. No, 2015, 2 years later. So then it hit me like a ton of bricks. No wonder I was always in so much trouble. They weren't investigating this organization, they were having outreach meetings with them. That's why we have stuff like the Blossom bombing. And then Janet Napolitano had the audacity to stand before all of us in the testimony before the committee, House committee, and say, we didn't get a ping. You're sure not going to get a ping when you're taking all the information out of the system. It won't ping if there's nothing there. And that's what I call obscene hubris. They took the information out of the system and then had the audacity to stand in front of us and tell us, we didn't get a ping. Like, there's nothing that we could have done. Oh gee, that's terrible. No, you took it out. That's why you don't get pings. And not only did you take it out, you're not putting new information in. So as time goes on, this black hole gets bigger and bigger, like a big stretchy rubber black hole. And that's what the book I wrote is about. The fact that I was ordered by my own administration to take information out of the law enforcement system, starting, actually the second time I got investigated was 2009 when I was told to take this stuff out. The first time I was investigated of the 9 was in fall of 2006 for writing an open source article called Green Tide Rising, Hamas Ascends. Why a CBP officer who was sworn law enforcement to protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic, would be sued for writing, not sued, investigated for writing an open source article on Hamas. Still, to this day, no one's ever really told me. But I know it was the CIA that turned me in because I took a class with them and they said so. And then the case officer who came down left the file on the desk in front of me upside down and walked out of the room. I just happened to look down and there it was. But what's really remarkable about it, and this may have never happened in the history of the agency, Will Ferry, did anybody see the press conference I did at the National Press Club on the 14th of June? Well, go back and look it up on C-SPAN or what, and you'll see William Ferry, he's the last guy to talk. He was the investigator who came down and investigated me. He is since retired. Well, a couple, 2-3 years later after that investigation, which by the way I was exonerated for after 11 months, we broke a major case together. Because he called me one morning and says, Haney, we got these guys here at the airport, what do you think they're doing? I said, they're Tablighi Jamaat, and they're going to Masjid Al-Fala in Corona, Queens, New York. Oh, thanks, man. So he calls his watch commander at the airport. Turns out he wasn't even home. He hadn't seen him either. And he tells the watch commander, don't let those guys go. They're Tablighis and they're going to the Corona Masjid. How the hell did you know that? I don't cuss, but I do quote people. You're not even home. I was right. And we prevented entry to all 5 of them. And it became the case that led to the Tablighi Jamaat initiative that I worked on at National Targeting Center, thus the access to the targeting framework vis-a-vis Al-Harbi. And that case was shut down by the Clinton State House, White State Department, and the DHS Civil Rights and Civil Liberties branch. And after I got back to my home port, I did another subcomponent, not knowing that they shut the case down. And that, my friends, is the 67 records that was deleted that led to San Bernardino and Orlando. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, through her State Department, shut down the case that very plausibly would have prevented both San Bernardino and Orlando. That's a pretty bold statement. Yes. Except for one problem. Here, just do a social experiment. Don't sneak up on him. But if you know a cop in your town is having a donut break, go over and ask him, hey, sir, are you able to stop crime? He's going to look at you like, what do you mean, am I able to stop crime? That's what I'm a cop for. Yeah, dumb question, right? So if I'm a subject matter expert in federal law enforcement, counterterrorism division, the top secret squirrel location in the whole country up there in Washington, D.C., and I'm working on a case that has 1,200 law enforcement actions already taken on it in 9 months, plus got a letter, which is in the back of the book, giving me credit for finding 300 terrorists. Is it a boastful statement to say that maybe we could have stopped San Bernardino when the case was related to the one they shut down? No, I don't think so. Next, please. Oh, the thing about Glenn Beck. The kid that doesn't exist is suing Glenn Beck for slander and defamation. And he also, the judge ordered on the 10th of this month that he was compelled to reveal his confidential sources. Wait a minute, what about whistleblowers? What about confidential sources? What about First Amendment? Hey, wait a minute. What about the fact that guy's a foreign national? What's he even doing here suing an American citizen at all? Things are way out of hand, folks. Way out of hand. This case should have never gone. I don't care what you think about Glenn Beck. It's not about him. He's an American citizen being sued by a foreign national. And now by a judge in the federal court system being ordered to reveal his confidential sources. So I think you're probably putting two and two together. You already figured out who one of the sources was, right? But it wasn't really actually me. It's a semantic technicality. Guess who I gave the information to? The House Committee on Homeland Security. After Janet Napolitano lied to Congress, they knew she was lying because why? Because I told them before she ever testified. So now they're faced with a moral crisis themselves. What are they going to do? A top official in the Obama administration just lied to a committee on Congress. Mr. Haney, do you happen to have proof of that? Yeah, I faxed it to the House Committee on Homeland Security's Secure Facts in the Ford building up there across from Rayburn in sight of the White House. It got leaked out of the House Committee, not by me. It got to Glenn Beck and Bret Baier on Fox. This kid that doesn't exist didn't sue Bret Baier or Fox, he sued Glenn Beck. I just found out 2 days ago Glenn Beck is not going to reveal his confidential sources. What he is going to do is see if he can mediate the possible settlement to avoid being sent to jail, maybe, or a big other kind of scandal, by talking a little bit more detail about what these records that were leaked actually meant. And we're hoping that the judge will finally have some sense and basically call it a day, right? So according to all this big long story, what does this have to do with Sharia? It has to do with Sharia because slander and defamation are capital offenses according to Islam. If this case were to prevail, what kind of precedent would it set here? It would make these kind of meetings illegal. Because somebody in the audience would come and somehow manage to get offended, and then they would sue the organizers of this meeting and anybody else they could name that was here for that. Because according to Islam, slander is not telling something that's not true. Slander is saying you have a red sweater and a brown hat on. And if you get offended by the fact I pointed that out, I just slandered you. It has nothing to do whether it's true or not. Next, please. And here's another one, the rape gangs, aka grooming gangs in the UK. Click. According to, now they're telling the women, don't provoke the immigrants. No responsibility on this protected class of people who can't control themselves in a Western culture is going to be put on the women. So what does this have to do with Sharia? According to the U.S. Southern Command in 2015, there were 331,000 migrants through the southwestern border, and of that, 30,000 of them were from countries of terrorist concern. Next. So what does that have to do with the price of tea? This right here, what your hand possesses, what your right hand. This is the verse, Quran 4:3, that authorizes men to marry 4 women. But it basically says if you can't find 4 women, you can take sexual slaves, ones that your right hand possesses. That's why it's important. Because what they're doing in Europe and what they could do crossing the southern border in the number of 30,000 is authorized by the peaceful religion of Islam, according to Quran chapter 4, verse 3. What your right hand possesses. They are authorized to plunder the unbelievers and take the women. as sex slaves. Next. Go ahead. And here's another long one. And I thought if anybody was really doubting what I said and what the motivation is, I put together all the verses in the Quran that describe what the award or reward in heaven for the mujahideen. We have produced the women of paradise as the bottom third in a creation and make them virgins, 56, so on, fair women, so on, so on. You can take this and you can read it. If anybody ever tells you that the killing is not in the Quran, just read verse 9, 111. Allah has purchased of the believers their persons and their goods, for theirs is the garden of paradise. They fight, the verb is qatl, means slaughter, in his cause, and they kill and they are killed. That's also the same verb, which is 4 times more frequently occurring in the Quran and dimensions more violent than the verb jihad. All of our endless argument about the tactic of jihad is a distraction from what the Quran actually teaches about tactics, which were infinitely more violent than what anything that we've ever heard vis-a-vis jihad. Go ahead. Same problem in Canada. Remember the map, the spinning world of North America? Canada isn't exempt either. And this is what they're teaching in the masjids. The word at the top means Habiba al-Maut, the love of death. They say of the Jews that the Jews love life, but we love death. And they mean it. So these evidences that I show you, straightforward, no varnishing, no altering, no redacting like Loretta Lynch, state plainly what their strategic and tactical purposes are. And notice the dates, by the way. Everything's quite recent. I don't use things that are many years old. I'm showing you information that's days old. Next. National security expert Trump says he's crazy because he says that Obama founded ISIS. Is Trump crazy? No. Next. And then next again. Now what about Claire McCaskill? Maybe she's right. It's Trump and Putin that founded the Islamic State. Boy, that Trump gets around, doesn't he? Okay, next. This statement betrays a complete lack of understanding of what these opposition groups on the ground in Syria actually want to accomplish, which again is, they're not fighting to remove Assad because we consider him to be a human rights violator. They're fighting to remove Assad so they can implement Sharia law. But they will take whatever we give them. But we're not even on the same page. Go ahead. And here's the answer to the whole big puzzle. Defense Intelligence Agency's report filed in August of 2012, a month before the attacks, that tell you quite plainly what actually happened. According to the DIA, the Obama administration was shipping small allotments of weapons from Benghazi to the coast of Syria, providing those small allotments of weapons to 3 main opposition groups. One was called Al-Nusra. The other is called Al-Qaeda of Iraq, the one that was supposedly on the run. Remember that? And the third one was the Muslim Brotherhood by specific name. And again, when I found this through FOIA, it hit me like a ton of bricks. No wonder I was always in so much trouble, because I was targeting the very same group, Muslim Brotherhood, that this administration formed not only an alliance with on the domestic counterterrorism front, but on the global. And they did it in Algeria and Tunisia and Egypt and other places around the Middle East. Next. How many guns did the U.S. lose track of in Iraq and Afghanistan? Billions, actually many thousands. Look at the date. This is like 2-3 days ago. They don't even know where this stuff is going. And guess who this weapons are going to? The reformatted Al-Nusra Front. They just put on a different mask, and a moderate mask, step up to the box and get a big download of weapons, and the government has no clue where they're going. Next. Again, way more than we're trying to read. But basically it says the American arming of Syrian rebels by both the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Department has also been troubled by questions of accountability and outright theft in a war where the battlefield is thick with jihadists aligned with Al-Qaeda or fighting under the banner of the Islamic State. We don't even know who these people are, just like the immigrants. The recipients were often manifestly corrupt and sometimes had close ties to the same militias and insurgents who were trying to drive out the United States and make sure its entire nation-building project did not stand. These are the people that we are supporting in the Middle East. Remember the $50 million for the five vetted moderates? Anyhow, this is where, we'll look at the date on this one, 24th of August. This is the stuff that's old news. This is going on right now. We're repeating the same mistakes over and over again because we don't understand the strategy. We still operate in a tactical way. If we understand what their strategy was to replace Assad with an ISIS-like organization, maybe we wouldn't be so eager to hand this stuff out like candy on 4th of July. Next. Okay, just in case you're tempted, you might be, to think that everything I'm talking about applies to over yonder, but not here in Ohio, or certainly not in America. Your boss just came to you and gave you another assignment because you did such a good job on the last one with the Muslim Brotherhood icon, that now you have another one. So let's look at this one and analyze it, just like we did the last one. What do you see? A Quran, good. A mosque, also iconic. What's then behind it, superimposed? Some similarities, right? It's what you call continuity of imagery. And see the look like wheats on the side? Those are exactly the same images that are in the Holy Land Foundation icon. And what it is Al-Arab, Al-Arabiya, the Arab Bible. Just like the Arab Spring in the Middle East. The words in Arabic say, if you lack knowledge, seek out those who know. So what would that imply? Based on the totality of the icon, if you read that verse in the Quran, what does it imply? Those guys are probably the ones that know. So somebody please read the words in English. Okay, just at pure face value, they don't really sound too terribly ominous, do they? Just on face value? Assembly, not too bad. Muslim, oh maybe. Jurists, neutral. America, long live America. Red, white, and blue, right? So what are we left with that we haven't examined yet? Oh, that's not important. In fact, you're not allowed to develop cases by association like that because you're Islamophobic and biased, obviously. You have implicit bias. In fact, you just invaded my safe space. We'll start at the top right. See the little circle on the Arabic word on the top right? That's an M. Just like in Hebrew, like we mentioned earlier, the Talmud. It comes from the root lamed, which means to learn. A person who does it is an M on the front of the root. Melamed, teacher. A thing that does it is a T, Talmud. The verb or the root is lamed, to learn. A thing that does it is the Talmud. A person that does it is a melamed. It's the same in Arabic. The first word is majama. It rhymes with pajama. Majama. And a jama is a group. The Tablighi Jamaat, you heard me refer to earlier, that's a plural with a T on the end of a whole big group. Majama is a group of people. The next word is fuqaha. It's the plural of the verb or the noun for law. Law is fiqh, like seek and fiqh. Fuqaha is the plural. The third word with a straight up line is al-sharia. Anybody heard that word before? And the last one is be'amrikia. Be always means in with. Just like in Hebrew, same in Arabic. Be means with or in. Be'amrikia. So what this is a group of lawyers promoting Sharia law in America. That's quite a bit different, wouldn't you say? So I'd like to give you a homework assignment. Maybe you should try calling your representative and asking them, why is the Assembly of Muslim Jurists still operating in America today when they seek to openly overthrow the Constitution? Well, how do you mean that? Because they issue fatwas, directives, and they tell American Muslims things like, if you join the military or law enforcement or the U.S. government, you can do it as long as, and here comes what we call comma, pause for effect, you hate him in your heart. It's called the doctrine of loyalty and enmity. You can pose as a member of that society as long as you hate it in your heart. Can you think of somebody that was that way in the military? Reed Al-Hassan. And it ripped him in half. He finally had to choose. Next. Go ahead. The Tablighi Jamaat. There's that word again. Jamaat means group. This means party or group of promoters. Go ahead. You guys might have seen me on Megyn Kelly. I was about to tell her that the people that did San Bernardino were part of Tablighi Jamaat and that they were Salafi. And she said, what's that? So I told her, it doesn't mean radical, it means original. Words matter, remember? Salafi does not mean radical. It means back to the original. A little bit different. For example, somebody tell me what taqiyya means. If I was a Muslim, I could get all bent out of shape and start screaming at you that you're misrepresenting Islam, because taqiyya does not mean lie. It means defensive response. Now, it might include lying, but it does not mean lying. They don't ever bother to tell you what it actually means. They just accuse you of not knowing what you're talking about. And they were technically right. Like Satan himself, the accuser. He will accuse you, but he'll never actually tell you what the right answer is. This is why I'm taking the time to show you what words mean, and how important they are. Because if you're going to go forward in this challenge that we face, it's imperative that you understand what words actually mean. Because if you put yourself in a public position like me, or at any time, and you use one of those words incorrectly, they will get on you like white on rice. And they will be right, technically. So taqiyya, by the way, just as an illustration, means defensive response, which might include lying. Okay, first I tell Megan, go ahead, that it's Tablighi Jamaat. How did I know? Because it was the case I referred to earlier with the 67 records and the 1,200 law enforcement actions and the 300 terrorists that I found. And I knew immediately as soon as I saw it what it was. And I actually yelled at my computer screen, alone in a house in Alexandria, that's my case. And I told all my colleagues. I ended up on Megan and I told her. Next. And then, click. A week later, the biggest windfall, the most spectacular thing I ever received in my law enforcement career happened. The FBI released the unredacted transcript of their interview with Omar Mateen, the person that supplied the guns to Tashfeen Malik and Syed Farouk. He's in jail now, by the way. Do you know why he's in jail right now? For multiple failed plots with Syed Farouk. Let that sink in for a minute. Wait a minute. Multiple, that's like plural? Failed plots with Syed Farouk? I thought that they told us that he was like maybe radicalized by that mysterious woman in black from Saudi Arabia. He did all this stuff before he ever even knew her. Here, with Enrique Marquez. What does paragraph 23 say? Marquez and Farouk discussed the what? Tablighi Jamaat movement. And Marquez began to pray more frequently at Farouk's residence. It proved my case. Right there. Why? Because what if I had said Syed Farouk was a member of Hamas or Hezbollah or something else? I would have been wrong. I would have discredited myself on national TV. Because even though he was still a terrorist, Haney, you don't know what you're talking about. See, that's why we investigated you 9 times. Nobody should be listening to you. But I was right. When nobody else knew it, simply because I had been working on the case. And that's not the end of it. Then there came another attack in Orlando. And the guy at Omar Mateen that did that, guess what masjid he went to? Fort Pierce Islamic Center. Guess what network it was part of? Exactly the same one as this one. And it took me a half an hour in my RV with my own computer, no secret squirrel stuff, just open source information to tie his mosque to the network that the government shut down. And I went on Breitbart 2 days after and said, it's not a lone wolf, it's not some weird guy that nobody knows. It's part of a network of organizations in the United States that's tied right back to the Tabligh Jamaat case that this government shut down in June of 2012. Next. And then I talked about it on the 28th of June this year. You guys should go look at the video of it. Remember we were talking about George Soros? This all happened today. Not the trial, not the hearings. The thing I'm going to tell you. The woman on the left of that picture is Farhana Kara. She's the president of Muslim Advocates. The guy on my right is Richard Cohen. He is the big cheese of the Southern Poverty Law Center, who goes around calling everybody hate groups. And there I am in the middle. Guess who received money back as far as 2008 to intrude into the law enforcement arena and push people like the guy in between them with the white hair and the dark glasses out of counterterrorism? Those two. The Investigative Project on Terrorism staff called me this morning and asked for my comment and insight on the fact that they've been weeding their way through these Soros FOIA documents and found out that they've been supported by Soros for the last 8 to 10 years. Only the Lord himself could have put me like a piece of bologna between those two. Because you should see their faces. You go back and watch it. Their expressions are, oof. It's really incredible. They were just horrified. Go ahead. And what do I have here? Go ahead. Well, here's what we saw tonight. Earlier. The case is breaking right now. Literally, like a wave on the shore. And I, my friends, was right in the middle of it. Because these people pushed, they started at the top like a pyramid and picked off the specialists, the subject matter experts like William Gothrop and Matthew Dooley and Stephen Coughlin and John Bandolo and other people that were in law enforcement. They picked them all off one at one and knocked them out. By God's grace alone, I stayed the whole time. I stayed all the way from the creation of Department of Homeland Security in March of 2003, right up till I retired honorably the 31st of July of 2015. And I saw it all, like a handheld camera. You might know or may not know that I was an entomologist before. You know what entomologists are? Classic nerds. I'm the founding member of the Nerd Society because entomologists are the biggest nerds of all. Why? Because of all the detail. You have to have a focus on detail and attention to behavior, especially in the area I was in. I studied ants. But not just ants, random ants of violence, like Napolitano calls them, random acts of violence. There's no such thing as a random act of violence. There's no such thing as a random ant of violence either. And the government says there's no colony that these random ants belong to. You just go around stomping on them individually, and maybe eventually you'll wipe them out. Well, why don't you just go where the nest is? That's the organization right there. Nope, there's no nest. They're random. Well, anyway, I was an entomologist. Careful observation of behavior and fine attention to detail. And then you do what I did with ants, follow the trail, and you find the nest. That's counterterrorism. right there in a nutshell. So I applied the same training I had in my scientific career to a new model, to a new species called terrorism. It was very successful. But I wrote everything down. Another thing my dad taught me when I was a kid, he said, take shorthand, Philip. I thought it was so I would be a better student, but that wasn't it. It was during the Vietnam War era, and he told me to take shorthand and typing so I'd have clerical skills in case I got drafted. I would maybe be able to have something more than just become a gravel agitator. No offense to the gravel agitators. Maybe a medic or something. So I took shorthand, and lo and behold, I took to it like a duck in water. In fact, I'll tell you what a nerd I was. There were 17 other girls in the class, and I never went on a date with one of them. Very shorthand. And I took it. Oh, I can write shorthand about as fast as I'm talking. When I was really good at it, this is about 110 to 115 words a minute. And I wrote down everything in shorthand, including the meeting that I was at the National Targeting Center, the day that the Department of State come in with 7 lawyers emerging out of one white van like the 7 dwarfs, because I was thinking out they come, one at a time, up the stairs, and 3 SESs, 3 administrative level guys from Department of State. They sit in a big room, and we have a big round table. They say, we have concerns about your focus on Tabligh-i-Jamaat, because they're not a terrorist organization, so we're concerned you're violating their civil rights and their civil liberties. And they shut the case down. But I wrote it all down in shorthand. I gave everything to Congress. I went to Congress 50 times. The first time I ever spoke in public, the picture you saw, was the 51st time, more or less. And I never went out of the bounds. I always followed the chain of command. I didn't pull a Snowden. I didn't dump the stuff on the public. I followed the chain of command. And one time I was with some of the senator's staff, Cruz maybe, and Issa, not Issa, his house, and Grassley, a few other ones. And I said, you know what, you guys, I learned something about this whole process. So they're waiting. Okay, what did you learn? There is no process. There is no room 243 where you can go and knock on the door and get some handy-dandy forms and they call you back in a couple of weeks. We're sorry you're having so much trouble, Mr. Haney. We're going to help you be a better whistleblower. No. There's 1,000 times I could have crashed into the wall. I was investigated 9 times. The last time was included the Department of Justice, who convened a grand jury to find probable cause to indict me on criminal charges. All for doing my job, which was inconvenient to this administration because they formed an alliance with terrorists and then remove the information from the system so they can stand there with their hands on their hips and cynically claim plausible deniability while they let American citizens like Glenn Beck and myself and my colleagues take the hits for their incompetence. It's enough to make me almost want to cuss. Because the audacity of it, to lie to the American people and let the people who took the oath take the hit for their incompetence. Believe me, friends, I've seen it up close and personal. 8 of the investigations were with the Obama administration, and they do not care. They have no regard for due process whatsoever. Oh no, they're not incompetent. They're just the opposite. Believe me. And I'll remember what I said about altering or abolishing the form of government. That's what they intend to do, and they're anything but incompetent. They are dedicated, very serious individuals who are willing to do virtually anything. I'll answer questions in just a few moments. How are we doing on time?
9 o'clock.
Okay. Well, fast forward, please. That's what we saw tonight. Like I said, this is a breaking story. Go ahead. Go ahead. Click, click, click. These are the words. Click again. We actually got to the words, the second part of it. Let's just read this one particular verse, and then I'll go to the end. O prophet, fight hard against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be harsh upon them. and their refuge is hell, and wretched is their destination. That's jihad. The line up there at the top in the Arabic is jihad. Is there anything about that seems even remotely like a peaceful inner struggle? It tells you who they're fighting against, the kufarim. And there's no word in English that we can convey the emotional intensity of the verb kufar, other than words that I won't say and mean it. We just don't have the equivalent in English to the emotional intensity of what that word actually means, unless you're in a screaming, bloody rage, and then you approximate what it actually means. And the hypocrites, these are the people that are not following Sharia law, who claim to be Muslim but are not observing. Remember what he called it? The gift from God? The Imam said it. And be harsh. And boy, when the Quran says harsh, it really means it. Harsh upon them and their refuge. After all that killing and slaughtering, then it says their refuge is hell and wretched is their destination. They're sending people to hell by plan, by tactical and strategic goal. Go ahead, next. The word I mentioned earlier is slaughter. Remember I talked to you about Quran 2:191. That verb occurs 4 times more frequently in Quran than jihad. Jihad is 40. This one's about 172. One more click. This is another companion verb. These are the operative verbs that are implemented by the catalyst of fitna. When you oppose, these verbs kick in. And again, their magnitude is more violent than the verb jihad. It also is all 3 in the same verse. You notice 2:191. Next, please. Go ahead. And then go all the way to the end, the last one. We'll end up where we started, right there. Oop, one too many. If you can go back, please try. All right. The verse was Quran 860 that I mentioned to you earlier. Oh, you're down at the bottom past. By the way, that's Hebrew. Lo yishama od Hamas ba'arseh. Did you know that the verb for violence in Hebrew is Hamas? That's it in red. So every time Israelis hear Hamas, it means violence to them. But there is a time coming when this controversy will be settled. Can you go backwards?
That's what I told you.
The other backwards. Okay, don't worry about it. Quran 860, which is what I was going to show you. Up, just a smidge up. That one. There you go. See what it says? Prepare to terrify your enemies and fight against them and defeat them in war. Turhibina, that means terrify your enemy. It's in the same exact verse, Quran 860, al-Anfal, as this verb at the top right in the Arabic is exactly the same word, prepare, as the verb or the word in the Muslim Brotherhood icon. I think that's accidental. If I say the word Zakor, how many people know what the word Zakor means? It's very meaningful, right? If I say John 3, can someone finish it for me? Yes, and why do we know that? We grow up with it. When you say Turhibuna, or you say why Ayuda, they know. It's iconic, and that's the point of icons. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. I guess we're going to have some few questions.
We're running a little late, so we'll do something different. You, the lady in the back, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. That's all we're going to do. Everybody else, if you want to buy Phil's book, line up. He'll do the processing table right there, sign your book for you. Okay, so if you come forward, the 6 that I called you, take 6 questions and get the answer real quick, and then we'll get to the book sales, because all of them run late. All right.
Could the 6 people who were selected for questions please come forward?
Scary.
That's why we're the same. Stop it, totally stupid, ignorant, blind. Just what you do is watch TV.